This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
Hello and welcome to News Extra here on Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. We're your hosts. I'm Stephen Imediegu here with my co-host Nabila Usman. On News Extra today, we look at a trending, recent and a recurring conversation. Governor Ademola Adeleke in the last few days of 2024 pardoned Adebayo Omisakin Sunday. Now, he did it just in time for the 53-year-old man to celebrate the new year as a free man. Barely 8 days later, Mr. Sunday would find himself back behind bars when he was caught stealing a television set. Now, this case is one of the many that are recurring in correctional facilities across Nigeria. Now, reports indicate that as many as 60% of the current inmates in correctional facilities in Nigeria are returning prisoners. This phenomenon is known as recidivism, and on today's conversation, we explore why recidivism occurs in Nigeria and how to reverse it. Joining the conversation is Dorcas Anaja, a legal practitioner and the communications associate with non-governmental organization Hope Behind Bars. Thank you for joining us on News Extra.
Hi, thank you for having me. Good morning.
Our pleasure. I reckon one thing that we would like to understand, first of all, is if there are, what you think are the major causes of recidivism.
One of the major causes of recidivism, the lack of rehabilitation programs in correctional facilities. So we have a lot of inmates going through the system that focuses more on punishment than rehabilitation. So what happens is that based on a lifestyle that they were living, and we even have a majority of people behind bars going there due to poverty. So you have a situation where a lot of inmates go through the system and they're not being rehabilitated. And so when they leave, because there's no program that provides for, re-entry or rehabilitation, when they leave, because their life has sort of been disrupted when they go through that system and there's no rehabilitation. When they leave and they leave the correctional centers back to society, it's very hard to find footing. So a lot of them commit those crimes, like we see in that example that you gave, and then they go back, they reoffend and they go back. And so it's like a horrible cycle that keeps happening where, because there's no rehabilitation, there's no system that makes it better, that when they leave these correctional facilities, they are able to reintegrate back into society. They come out, they reoffend, they go back. So it continues to be that cycle. I'll say that's one of the major reasons. And one of the major reasons for lack of rehabilitation, also research has shown that it moves to overcrowding of our correctional facilities. Because our prisons are overcrowded, there is very poor rehabilitation that goes in, because there are so many, they are barely getting by. You hear how they are barely even feeding them properly. Talk more of providing things like rehabilitation for them. So it's that horrible cycle of no rehabilitation, no reintegration plan. So they go through the system that just mainly punishes, and when they are done, they go back into society. And because there's no proper re-entry programs happening in behind bars, they reoffend and they come back. And I think the last major reason I would say that would be social stigma. So a lot of people see people behind bars, they see all of them as criminals, all of them as people that, okay, they committed this.
My apologies. Ms. Anaja, just give us a moment. We're going to reconnect with you so that we can continue the conversation without interruption. Dorcas Anaja is a legal practitioner and the communications associate with NGO Hope Behind Bars. She joins us this day on News Extra to talk about recidivism, which is a phenomenon that occurs where an inmate is pardoned or released from a correctional facility, goes back into society, and then in a very short time finds themselves behind bars. We started off this conversation by exemplifying one individual who 8 days after receiving a governor's pardon was back in prison, this time for stealing a television set. And as Ms. Anaja tells us, part of why this happens is because the correctional facilities seem to focus more on punishment than on rehabilitation.
So, Ms. Anaja,
Yes.
you've just listed three major reasons why we see people return to a life of crime. I'm curious, are there identifiable markers or a pattern of sorts that allows us to be preemptive, right? So is there a certain category of prisoner that is more likely to be released and return because they've gone back to crime?
Yes, I would say there's some markers that we can find, because based on our work and based on research, we see that people who commit offenses like, they call them misdemeanors under law, but so offenses like stealing, theft, conspiracy to defraud, because no proper rehabilitation goes through. And again, remember I said that a lot of people behind bars go into the are poor, or they live, like many of them lack education, and so many of the offenses we even find are things like stealing, robbery, conspiracy to commit fraud. And because no rehabilitation happens, these people leave and they have no education, they have no skills. So what happens is that they leave and they go back to commit those crimes. So basically that lifestyle that they know, that way of earning a living that they know, they go back to it. So I would say those are those indicators and markers that we found. But I won't say reoffending is linked to any particular crime per se, because when rehabilitation doesn't happen, people would reoffend and do things that they are used to. So if there's no psychological support given, they would reoffend. But so far we've noticed that crimes like robbery, theft, fraud, they have a tendency to reoffend and come back to the system.
So, apologies. Now I'm curious as to, you've talked about three factors that lead to people who released from prison going back behind bars. You've also mentioned that the facilities typically focus on punishment versus rehabilitation. I'm curious about how that gap, if I can call it that, can be filled in, and who should actually step up to ensure that people who go through correctional facilities actually come out and have a better shot at being productive members of society.
Okay, so I feel like everything in society, it really does need all hands on deck, right from the government, because they are the I want to say the pinnacle of in making things happen when it comes to society. So in creating laws, the correctional facilities in 2019 were moved from being called prisons to correctional facilities, and that led to the invention of the Nigerian Correctional Service Act 2019. That act has done a good job in breaking down and moving from just strictly punishment that happened with colonial times to rehabilitation. But we find that when it comes to implementation, we don't see that as much. Now, the correctional facilities have tried. You see that they even have these programs behind bars. You have things like education, organizations like Hope Behind Bars has tried as much as possible to provide these programs. But the thing is the quality of it. So we need all hands on deck, from the government to organizations like non-profits, being invested in providing these programs, providing these rehabilitation programs. Working in this sector, I've seen that a lot of people do not think about people behind bars. I think it's more of like an out of sight, out of mind situation when it comes to correctional facilities. So we'll definitely need all hands on deck, from the government ensuring and implementing that the laws that they've laid out in the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019 is being followed, and rehabilitation is the core of what happens behind bars, to other organizations, to policymakers, ensuring that though this act is there, though this law is there, it's not perfect. There are certain things that need to be put in place, down to allocating budgets to prisons to ensure that inmates are being rehabilitated. So I would say all hands on deck, even down to us, the citizens. There's a lot of stigma that goes when people come out of prisons, come out of correctional facilities. People see them as people run away from them. They don't want to engage with them. They go to have jobs, like they go to seek for jobs, and they are not being employed. And we can understand, because given the fact that they are not being rehabilitated, people still have that fear that, oh, you are coming to my job to steal. But if we consider that everybody needs to give each other, like give them a second chance, give them a right to prove themselves wrong, or whatever, but we need all hands on deck to ensure.
So, Ms. Anaja, my apologies. Let me interrupt you. You've been talking quite a lot about rehabilitation, and I'd like you to give us a brief sense of what that looks like. What exactly does rehabilitation entail?
Okay, so what that looks like I would say right from when someone is being convicted. Now, another thing is that a majority of people behind bars are awaiting trial, but immediately they get into that correctional facility, psychological support is being given to them. They are linked to a therapist, they are linked to a counselor to kind of find out what their head space is at. A lot of people even commit. We have, based on cases, we see that a lot of people even behind bars committed crimes based on self-defense, based on insanity, several reasons why people commit crime. So psychological support needs to be provided to them to understand where their headspace is at. And then the rehabilitation is also providing skills. So Hope Behind Bars Streets Inside Out Hub does this thing where we provide skill acquisition hubs behind bars for people. That's some form of rehabilitation, some form of reformation to ensure that these people are not idle behind bars. Their minds are being engaged. They are being taught new skills that they can even start learning while behind bars, so that even when they come out, they have something to fall back on. So I would say those are practical tips of rehabilitation. So engaging their minds, providing psychological and emotional support to them to get where their head is at, to get what made them commit this crime. Are they sorry? Are they interested in making amends? Why don't they want to make amends? Those things need to be. But if they are just left idle and just basically dumped in those correctional facilities, no rehabilitation is happening. So I think those be the practical tips to say about how to rehabilitate them.
We've got maybe a minute left. I do want to ask your thoughts on something. India is known for operating open prisons, right? And part of it is towards essentially rehabilitating prisoners and reducing psychological stress. There's usually requirements that a prisoner or a convict must meet to be eligible to live in an open prison. Is that a workable option for Nigeria, especially with these kinds of criminals who their crime is, like you said, classified under a misdemeanor?
Yeah, I think it's something that we should look at, but for now, I would not think it's possible, given the way our structure is, given the way even society and citizens look at people behind bars. So it's important. A lot of things need to be put in place before that option is considered. If rehabilitation doesn't happen, people will not feel safe to have that. But I would say it's very important and it's a good initiative, because we've seen that in countries where there's less, when there are lower rates of reoffending, there's that constant support between people behind bars and citizens who are not behind bars. They need to understand that, okay, though you've committed this crime, you are still part of us. We want to see you get better. We want to see you get the rehabilitation that you need. But for it to happen in Nigeria, I think a lot of things need to be put in place before that's even an option.
Ms. Anaja, thank you very much for your time and your expertise on this conversation. Dorcas Anaja is a legal practitioner and the communications associate at Hope Behind Bars, an NGO that works with incarcerated individuals to give them a sense of purpose and help with the rehabilitation process. You've been listening to News Extra on Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. We urge you to stay tuned to your Beyond the News station. In a few short moments, we'll be turning to the front pages of our dailies on the News Review. Good morning.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.